The morning sun cast long shadows across Haven Colony when the emergency sirens began their haunting wail. Captain Robert Miller dropped his coffee cup and rushed toward the control room, his boots echoing against the metal corridors of the small frontier settlement. The colony of 300 souls had been peaceful for months, but the desperate sound of the alarms meant only one thing: something was very wrong. "What do we have, Thompson?" Miller barked at the young communications officer who was frantically adjusting his equipment. "Unknown ship coming in fast, sir," Thompson replied, his voice tight with worry. "It's big, and the readings are all wrong. Whatever it is, it's going to crash." Dr. Kate Wilson grabbed her medical bag from the shelf, her heart racing as she heard the news over the intercom. As the colony's doctor and scientist, she had seen many emergencies, but alien contact was still rare on their distant world. The rescue team assembled quickly, Miller, Wilson, and 6 of their best people, all armed and ready for anything. They followed the trail of smoke through the thick forest that surrounded their settlement. The trees were ancient here, some as wide as houses, and they provided cover as the team moved toward the crash site. The smell of burning metal and something else, something organic, filled the air. When they reached the clearing, everyone stopped and stared. The ship was unlike anything in their databases. It looked almost alive, with curved surfaces that seemed to breathe and metal that shifted colors in the sunlight. Steam rose from its hull, and strange lights flickered beneath its surface. "Stay alert," Miller whispered, raising his weapon. "We don't know what's in there." They approached carefully, but before they could examine the ship properly, a sound came from inside, a deep, rumbling voice that spoke in a language none of them recognized. The ship's door, or what they thought was a door, slowly opened with a wet, sliding sound. What emerged made several team members step back in fear. The creature stood nearly 10 feet tall, covered in what looked like natural armor plating that gleamed like black glass. Its arms were thick as tree trunks, ending in hands that bore claws longer than kitchen knives. Golden blood seeped from multiple wounds across its massive frame. But the most surprising thing was its eyes. They were large and golden, filled not with the savage hunger everyone expected from such a predator, but with desperate sadness and pain. "Please," the creature spoke, and their translators crackled to life. "I do not have much time." Dr. Wilson found herself stepping forward, despite every instinct telling her to run. Something in the alien's voice reminded her of her patients back on Earth, the same tone of desperate hope mixed with acceptance of fate. "My name is Kethvar," the creature continued, his massive form swaying as he fought to stay standing. "My world is gone. The savage clans came with fire and death. My mate, my pack, my people, all destroyed." The alien's legs gave way, and he crashed to the forest floor with a sound like falling stones. Wilson rushed to his side, her medical training overriding her fear. The creature's blood was warm, almost hot, and his breathing came in sharp, painful gasps. "There is something you must know," Kethvar whispered, his great head turning toward the ship. "In my vessel, there are 3 cubs. They are the last of our bloodline, perhaps the last of our kind." Miller felt his stomach drop. Cubs meant children. Alien children of a species known throughout the galaxy as apex predators, beings that could tear through steel with their bare hands and hunt creatures 10 times their size. "They are just babies," the dying alien continued, seeming to read the fear in their faces. "They have done nothing wrong. They know only love and play, as all young ones should." Dr. Wilson looked into those golden eyes and saw something that transcended species, a parent's love for their children. "What do you want us to do?" "Care for them," Kethvar begged, his massive hand reaching toward her. "Teach them. Show them there is more to existence than hunting and killing. My people have forgotten this, but perhaps yours remember." The request was impossible. These humans lived on a small frontier world with limited resources. Taking in 3 alien predators, even young ones, could mean death for everyone in the colony. Yet as Wilson looked at this dying father, she found herself nodding. "I promise," she said simply, taking his enormous hand in both of hers. A sound like purring came from Kethvar's throat, what might have been relief or gratitude. "They are in the rear compartment. They will be frightened. They have never seen beings like you." With those words, the great alien's eyes closed, and his breathing stopped. The forest fell silent except for the gentle crackling of cooling metal from the ship. Miller looked at Wilson as if she had lost her mind. "Kate, what have you done? We can't take care of alien predators." But Wilson was already walking toward the ship, following the soft sounds coming from within. In the rear compartment, huddled together in what looked like a nest of soft materials, were 3 small forms no bigger than house cats. They were covered in downy fur that would someday become deadly armor, and their tiny claws were soft and harmless. When they saw the humans, the cubs made small mewing sounds and pressed closer together. Their eyes were the same golden color as their father's, but filled with innocence and fear rather than the legendary fury of their species. Wilson reached out slowly, speaking in gentle tones. "It's okay, little ones. You're safe now." One of the cubs, braver than the others, crept forward and sniffed her outstretched hand. When she didn't pull away, it pressed its small head against her palm, purring softly. Miller shook his head, but he was already thinking about how they would explain this to the Colony Council. 3 alien predators, raised by humans. It was either going to be the greatest disaster in colonial history, or something completely unprecedented. As they prepared to bring the cubs back to the colony, none of them could imagine how much their small world was about to change. 6 months had passed since that fateful day in the forest, and Haven Colony had transformed in ways nobody could have predicted. The 3 cubs, now named Rex, Luna, and Storm by the colonists, had grown from tiny, frightened creatures into playful youngsters the size of large dogs. Their soft baby fur was beginning to show hints of the armor plating that would one day make them feared throughout the galaxy. Dr. Kate Wilson sat in her laboratory, watching Rex attempt to use her computer tablet with claws that were still learning to be gentle. The young alien had shown remarkable intelligence from the very beginning, picking up human words faster than anyone thought possible. His golden eyes followed her movements with curious interest, and he made soft chittering sounds that their translators were slowly learning to interpret. "Kate, you need to see this," called Tom Harper from the doorway. Tom taught the colony's children and had been skeptical about the cubs at first. Now he stood with Luna pressed against his side, her dark fur gleaming in the afternoon sun. "She's been helping with the little ones again." In the corner of the room, 5-year-old Emma sat crying. The little girl missed her grandparents back on Earth and often had these sad moments. Luna approached slowly, making the soft purring sounds that the cubs used when they were content. She gently nuzzled Emma's cheek with her nose, and the child's tears stopped almost immediately. "She always knows when someone is sad," Tom said with wonder in his voice. "It's like she can sense emotions." Meanwhile, Storm had developed his own special gift. The largest of the 3 cubs had shown an amazing ability to detect danger before humans could. Last week, when old Mr. Peterson had his heart attack, Storm had alerted Dr. Wilson 20 minutes before the man even felt chest pain. The cub had stood by Peterson's chair, whining softly and refusing to move until the doctor came to check on him. Captain Miller walked through the colony square, still amazed by what he saw. Children played games with the 3 cubs, laughing as Rex gently tossed a ball with claws that could have cut through steel. The young alien was always careful, always gentle, even when his predatory instincts wanted him to pounce and grab. "They are not what the galactic databases described," Miller said to Wilson during their evening meeting. "Every report says adult Vorthak are killing machines that show no mercy." "Those adults grew up in their natural environment," Wilson replied, watching Storm play tag with a group of children in the courtyard below. "These 3 are learning about family and love first. They are discovering what it means to protect rather than hunt." The change wasn't just in the cubs. The colonists themselves had transformed from fearful guardians into genuine family members. When Supply Captain Morrison arrived on his monthly run, he was shocked to see children riding on Luna's back while Rex helped unload cargo boxes with careful precision. "Colony Command is going to think I'm lying in my reports," Morrison had laughed, but Wilson could see the concern in his eyes. Not everyone in the galaxy would understand what was happening here. The cubs were learning human customs and emotions, but they were also teaching the colonists about themselves. Rex had shown them that Vorthak communicated through subtle body movements and different types of growls. Luna demonstrated that her species had an incredible sense of smell that could detect illness and emotional states. Storm revealed that young Vorthak naturally wanted to protect smaller, weaker beings. Dr. Wilson spent hours each day working with the 3 cubs, learning their individual personalities. Rex was the curious one, always asking questions through his translator and trying to understand how human technology worked. He loved puzzles and had figured out how to operate the colony's basic computer systems within weeks. Luna was the gentle soul, drawn to anyone who seemed sad or hurt. She had an instinctive understanding of healing and often brought injured birds or small animals to Wilson for treatment. The children adored her because she seemed to know exactly when they needed comfort. Storm was the protector, always positioning himself between his human family and anything he perceived as a threat. When wild animals came too close to the colony, Storm would place himself at the perimeter and make low warning sounds that sent them running. Yet he was incredibly gentle with the colonists, especially the elderly and the very young. The cubs had their own sleeping area in the colony's main building, but they often wandered to different homes at night. Rex liked to sleep near the library, surrounded by the books and computers he found so fascinating. Luna usually ended up in the medical bay, curled up near Wilson's office where she could monitor everyone's health. Storm positioned himself near the main entrance, his natural protective instincts making him want to guard against danger. Food had been a challenge at first. The cubs were carnivores, but they had learned to accept the colony's protein supplements mixed with local game that the hunters brought in. They ate with careful manners, never grabbing or being greedy, always waiting for permission before taking their meals. Language development was progressing rapidly. All three cubs could understand most human speech now, and they were beginning to speak simple words through their translators. Rex had been the first to say thank you, Luna had mastered sorry when she accidentally knocked something over, and Storm's first clear word had been family. The colonists had also learned to read Vorthak body language. A low rumbling meant contentment, rapid tail movements showed excitement, and the way they positioned their ears indicated different moods. It was like learning to communicate with beloved pets, except these pets were highly intelligent beings who would someday grow into powerful adults. As Wilson tucked the three cubs into their beds each night, she often wondered what their father Kethvar would think of his children now. They were still Vorthak, still predators by nature, but they had learned that strength could be used for protection instead of destruction. They had discovered that being feared was less important than being loved. The galaxy had never seen anything like these three cubs before, and Wilson suspected that Haven Colony was about to change the entire understanding of what the Vorthak species could become. 2 years had passed since the cubs first arrived, and Haven Colony faced new challenges that nobody had anticipated. Rex, Luna, and Storm were no longer the cute, harmless creatures that had won everyone's hearts. They now stood nearly 7 feet tall, their natural armor gleaming with adult strength, and their claws had grown sharp enough to cut through metal without effort. Dr. Kate Wilson watched Rex accidentally crush another data tablet in his enthusiasm to help with her research. The young Vorthak's face showed immediate regret, his golden eyes wide with embarrassment as he stared at the broken pieces in his massive hands. "I am sorry, Kate," Rex said through his translator, his voice now deep and rumbling like distant thunder. "I forgot my strength again." "It's okay," Wilson replied gently, though this was the 5th tablet this month. The cubs were struggling with their growing power, and standard human equipment simply couldn't handle their natural strength anymore. Everything had to be specially reinforced now, chairs, doors, even their eating utensils. The real challenge came during their supervised hunting trips in the forest. Storm had taken down a wild boar last week with such swift, deadly precision that even the colony's trained marines had stepped back in alarm. The young Vorthak had moved like lightning, his claws finding the exact spot to end the animal's life instantly and painlessly. Storm had looked confused by their reaction. To him, he had simply provided food for his pack, his human pack, the way his instincts told him to. He couldn't understand why the humans seemed frightened of abilities that felt as natural to him as breathing. "We need better equipment and larger spaces," Wilson explained to Captain Miller during their weekly meeting. "They're not dangerous to us, they would never hurt their family, but they're having trouble controlling their own nature." The situation became more complicated when Luna's enhanced senses began picking up things that worried the colonists. She could smell sickness in people days before symptoms appeared, hear conversations from incredible distances, and detect the emotional states of everyone around her. While these abilities were helpful, they also made some colonists uncomfortable. "She knows too much," whispered Mrs. Patterson to her husband after Luna had correctly predicted that their neighbor was developing a fever. "It's not natural for anything to have senses that sharp." Things reached a breaking point when the new settlers from Earth colony ship Fortune arrived. Captain Marcus Webb led 200 fresh colonists who had heard about Haven's alien problem during their long journey from Earth. He took one look at the 3 young Vorthak and immediately demanded their removal. "Those are killing machines," Webb declared during a heated colony meeting. "I don't care how tame you think they are. My people won't live in fear of apex predators." The original colonists tried to explain, but Webb wouldn't listen. He had brought detailed reports about adult Vorthak attacks on other worlds, stories of entire settlements destroyed by rampaging predators. To him, Rex, Luna, and Storm were just disasters waiting to happen. Rex, Luna, and Storm sensed the hostility immediately. Their enhanced hearing picked up every whispered conversation, every fearful comment, every suggestion that they should be removed or destroyed. The 3 young Vorthak pressed closer to their original human family, their postures protective but submissive, a combination that would have confused any expert on Vorthak behavior. "They understand every word you're saying," Wilson said firmly, standing between the newcomers and her charges. They're not animals or weapons. They're family. Young Danny Fisher, now 8 years old, stepped forward without fear and placed his small hand on Rex's enormous arm. Rex saved me when I fell through the ice last winter. He jumped into the freezing water and pulled me out, then Luna and Storm kept me warm until help came. Other original colonists began sharing their own stories. How Storm had detected a gas leak before it could cause an explosion. How Luna had found a lost child in the forest using her incredible senses. How Rex had figured out a way to repair their broken water purification system when even the engineers were stumped. But the new settlers weren't convinced. They saw only the size, the claws, the natural weapons that could end human lives in seconds. They organized meetings without the original colonists, making plans to force the colony leadership to choose between the new families and the three Vorthak. The tension reached its peak during a confrontation in the main square. Captain Webb had brought armed security guards, and they faced off against the original colonists who had formed a protective circle around Rex, Luna, and Storm. "Stand aside," Webb ordered. "These creatures need to be contained or removed. I won't let my children live in danger." For a moment, Wilson saw something flicker in Storm's eyes, something ancient and deadly. The young Vorthak's muscles tensed, and she realized he was calculating threats, identifying targets, preparing to defend his pack with lethal force if necessary. His siblings stood ready beside him, their own predatory instincts awakening for the first time. But then Luna made a soft sound, almost like a whimper. Storm's head turned toward her, and Wilson saw the wildness fade from his eyes. The three young Vorthak remained perfectly still, their loyalty to their human family stronger than their predatory nature. "We will not fight," Rex spoke clearly, his translator carrying his words to everyone present. "We are not like the others of our kind. We choose peace because our family taught us love is stronger than fear." The standoff continued as both groups of humans stared at the three young aliens who had learned to control instincts that had been bred into their species for millions of years. Webb's hand moved toward his weapon, and every original colonist held their breath. Nobody knew that in just a few months, this growing conflict would become irrelevant when a much greater threat would test the true bonds between humans and their unlikely family members. The attack came without warning on a peaceful morning when most of the colonists were having breakfast. The Krillian raiders struck like black death from the sky, their warships descending through the clouds with weapons already firing. The first explosion shook the entire colony, shattering windows and sending people running for emergency shelters. Captain Miller rushed to the communications center as alarms screamed throughout Haven Colony. "How many ships?" he shouted over the noise. "6 heavy cruisers, sir," Lieutenant Cooper replied, his face pale with fear. "They've got enough firepower to level the entire settlement." Dr. Wilson grabbed her medical supplies and ran toward the main shelter, but stopped when she saw Rex, Luna, and Storm standing perfectly still in the middle of the chaos. The three young Vorthak were watching the enemy ships with eyes that seemed to glow within a fire. "Get to safety," Wilson called to them, but Rex turned his massive head toward her. "Kate," he said through his translator, his voice calm despite the explosions around them. "Let us help." "Absolutely not," Miller interrupted, joining them as another blast rocked the colony. "You could be killed. This isn't your fight." Storm stepped forward, his enormous frame casting a shadow over the humans he had grown up with. "Yes, it is. This is our home. These are our people. Family protects family." The words hit Wilson like a physical blow. These three beings, who could have used their natural abilities to escape to the forest and survive, were choosing to stay and fight for a species that wasn't their own. Luna moved closer to Wilson, her golden eyes filled with determination. "We are not helpless children anymore. We are Vorthak. We know how to fight." Before anyone could argue further, Krillian soldiers began landing in the colony square. They were smaller than humans but heavily armed, their energy weapons cutting through the air like deadly lightning. The colony's small militia took defensive positions, but everyone knew they were outmatched. That was when Rex, Luna, and Storm did something that would be remembered in Haven Colony's history forever. They moved with the deadly grace that had been bred into their species for millions of years, but they used it not for mindless destruction, but for protection. Rex coordinated the human defenders with tactical brilliance that seemed to come from genetic memory. He positioned colonists in safe locations, used his massive strength to move heavy barriers into place, and called out enemy positions with perfect accuracy. His deep voice carried over the battle sounds, giving orders that saved dozens of lives. Luna used her incredible stealth abilities to move like a ghost through the fighting. She appeared behind enemy soldiers not to kill them, but to render them unconscious using pressure point techniques that Dr. Wilson had taught her during medical training. Her enhanced senses allowed her to detect ambushes before they happened, warning the human defenders just in time. Storm became a living shield, his armored body absorbing enemy fire while evacuating trapped colonists. Tom Harper watched in amazement as the young Vorthak carried 3 injured children to safety, enemy plasma bolts bouncing off his natural armor without slowing him down. "They're not fighting like predators," Harper breathed to Wilson as they watched from the medical station. "They're fighting like guardians." The battle raged for hours. The Krillian raiders had expected an easy victory against a small human colony, but they hadn't counted on 3 young Vorthak who had learned that strength should be used to protect the weak, not destroy them. Rex used his claws not to tear enemies apart, but to disable their weapons and equipment. He moved with surgical precision, breaking guns and cutting power cables while leaving the soldiers alive but helpless. Luna darted between buildings, using her speed and stealth to rescue civilians and guide them to safety. Storm positioned himself at the most dangerous points, his massive frame drawing enemy fire away from the humans he loved. Captain Webb, who had argued so strongly for their removal, found himself saved by Luna when Krillian soldiers cornered him near the storage depot. She appeared from nowhere, disabled 3 enemies in seconds, and then helped the injured captain to the medical station. "Why?" Webb asked weakly as Luna bandaged his wounds with gentle hands that ended in deadly claws. "Why save me? I wanted you gone." Luna's golden eyes met his, and her translator carried her simple answer, "Because you are part of our family now. All humans here are our family." The tide of battle turned when Storm made the ultimate sacrifice. A Krillian heavy weapon was aimed at the main shelter where 30 children were hiding. Without hesitation, Storm threw himself between the weapon and the shelter, taking the full force of the plasma blast on his armored chest. The young Vorthak crashed to the ground, his armor cracked and smoking, but the children behind him were safe. Rex and Luna roared with fury, the first time any colonist had heard them make such a sound, and their retaliation was swift and decisive. When Federation ships finally arrived 4 hours later, they found the Krillian raiders in full retreat. The survivors told stories that seemed impossible, 3 young Vorthak who fought not with savage hunger, but with the disciplined protection instincts of beings who had learned that love was stronger than violence. Storm lay unconscious in the medical bay, his powerful body fighting to heal from injuries that would have killed any human. Rex sat beside his brother's bed, his massive hand gently holding Storm's, while Luna paced the room like a worried parent. Dr. Wilson worked desperately to save Storm's life, using everything she knew about Vorthak physiology. Around the colony, humans who had once feared these 3 young aliens now prayed for their recovery, understanding finally that the bond between them went far deeper than species or biology. Captain Webb stood in the doorway of the medical bay, watching the 3 beings who had risked everything to save people who had wanted them gone. For the first time, he truly understood what the original colonists had been trying to tell him. These weren't just tamed predators. They were family. 5 years after that desperate crash landing in the forest, the skies above Haven Colony darkened with ships that blocked out the sun. Not just 1 or 2 vessels, but an entire Vorthak war fleet, massive black ships that pulsed with living metal and bristled with weapons capable of destroying planets. The colonists gathered in the main square, parents holding their children close as they stared up at the impossible sight. Captain Miller tried to maintain calm, but his voice shook as he spoke into his communicator. "All defensive positions, stand ready. But do not fire unless fired upon." Everyone knew their small colony weapons would be useless against such overwhelming force. Rex, Luna, and Storm stood together near the colony center, their golden eyes fixed on the largest ship as it descended toward the landing pad. Storm had recovered from his battle injuries, though scars now marked his once perfect armor. The 3 young Vorthak seemed uncertain for the first time since their arrival, their usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "What if they want to take us away?" Luna whispered through her translator, pressing close to Dr. Wilson who had rushed to their side. "Then they'll have to go through all of us first," Wilson replied firmly, though her heart was racing. She had heard the stories about adult Vorthak, beings of such terrible power that entire star systems feared their approach. The command ship settled onto the landing pad with a sound like rolling thunder. Its hull seemed to breathe, and strange lights flickered beneath its surface like captured lightning. When the boarding ramp lowered, the air itself seemed to grow heavy with menace. What emerged made even Rex, Luna, and Storm step backward. The creature stood over 12 feet tall, her natural armor gleaming like black diamonds in the sunlight. Ancient scars covered her massive frame, telling stories of countless battles and victories. Her eyes held the wisdom and fury of millennia, and her presence made every human instinct scream warnings about apex predators. Behind her came a war party of adult Vorthak, each one a legendary warrior in their own right. Their claws gleamed like polished steel, their armor showed the marks of hundreds of conflicts, and their movements spoke of beings who had never known defeat in battle. The leader's voice rumbled through her translator like distant thunder as her gaze swept over the peaceful colony. I am Elder Clanmother Vextai of the Crimson Fang clan. I have searched 5 years across the galaxy for the cubs of my fallen sister, Kethvar. Dr. Wilson stepped forward, her small human frame looking tiny beside the alien matriarch. You're here for them, she said simply, gesturing toward Rex, Luna, and Storm. Vextai's golden eyes studied the 3 young Vorthak with an expression that was impossible to read. I expected to find corpses or traumatized survivors of human experimentation. My sister's message said she had left her cubs with your kind before her death. The elder walked slowly around Rex, Luna, and Storm, examining them like a general inspecting troops. The colonists held their breath, waiting for her verdict. These 3 had become their family, their protectors, their friends. The thought of losing them now was unbearable. Instead, Vextai continued, her voice growing quieter, I find something that should not exist. Rex stepped forward, his head held high with a dignity that surprised even Wilson. When he spoke, it was in perfect Vorthak, a language he had somehow learned from old databases and his own genetic memories. Honored Elder, Rex said with formal respect, we request permission to remain as guardians of our chosen pack. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Vextai stared at Rex as if seeing a ghost, then turned her ancient gaze to Luna and Storm. She saw strength without cruelty, power without arrogance, and something she had never witnessed in 10,000 years of Vorthak history. Before anyone could react, 8-year-old Emma Peterson broke away from her parents and ran straight toward the terrifying alien warriors. The child wrapped her small arms around Luna's legs and looked up at Vextai without fear. You can't take them away, Emma declared in her clear child's voice. They're our family. They saved us from the bad aliens, and they help us when we're scared, and Luna always knows when I'm sad. Other colonists began stepping forward despite their fear. Tom Harper placed his hand on Rex's shoulder. Old Mr. Peterson nodded respectfully to Storm. Families who had been protected and loved by these unlikely guardians formed a protective circle around their 3 defenders. Captain Webb, his arm still in a sling from the Krillian attack, spoke up from the crowd. I came here wanting them gone. I thought they were monsters. But when those raiders attacked, these 3 risked their lives to save people who had feared them. They're not just family to us, they're heroes. Vextai watched in growing amazement as young Danny Fisher climbed onto Rex's back without hesitation, as Luna gently corrected a child's pronunciation of a Vorthak word, as Storm carefully distributed treats to eager youngsters who showed no fear of his massive claws. The Elder's warriors stood frozen in shock. They had come expecting to rescue traumatized cubs from human captivity, prepared to destroy this colony if necessary. Instead, they witnessed something that challenged everything they believed about their own species. What did you do to them? Vextai finally asked Wilson, her ancient voice barely above a whisper. Wilson smiled through her tears as she watched Storm kneel down so a group of children could pet his scarred armor. Nothing special. We just loved them. The elder clan mother stood speechless for the first time in her 1,000-year life. She watched as her warriors, the most feared beings in known space, received friendly greetings from cubs who purred and chittered in broken Vorthak. She saw predators who had learned gentleness before violence, strength tempered by compassion, and honor that came from protecting the weak rather than conquering them. 10-year-old Lucy Martinez tugged on Vextai's armored hand, completely unafraid of the massive alien. Are you Rex's mama? She asked innocently. He talks about his family sometimes. He misses them, but he says we're his family now too. Vextai knelt down to the child's level, her enormous frame still towering over the little girl. For a moment, her fierce expression softened into something almost tender. No, little one. I am his elder, his guide. But I see now that he has found something far more precious than bloodline. She stood and addressed the entire colony, her voice carrying the weight of authority that had commanded fleets and conquered worlds. In all our history, we Vorthak have believed that strength comes from fear, that honor comes from victory, that survival requires the destruction of the weak. The elder gestured toward Rex, Luna, and Storm, who stood surrounded by their human family with expressions of quiet pride. These 3 have proven our ancient ways wrong. They have discovered something we had forgotten, that true strength comes from protecting those we love. Vextai turned back to Wilson with something that might have been tears in her golden eyes. The first alliance between our peoples will not be signed with treaties or trade agreements. It will be written in the bonds of family that transcend species.